There's an increase in the number of people cutting off their parents, but there's one thing I've noticed about this trend. Has anybody else noticed that when an adult child chooses not to have a relationship with a parent, it's always, but it's your mom and dad. You only get one mom and dad. Why are you doing that? And it's never, wow, what could a parent have done to cause their child to make this decision, but feel like it was the right one? It's never, what happened that made a grown adult feel like the need to walk away from the people who raised them? And it's definitely never, but they're your children. How can you treat them that way? Why is the weight placed on the child? Why is the burden of maintaining peace, preserving connection, and forgiving endlessly dumped onto the very person who's probably carrying the scars? No one ever stops to think, maybe that parent wasn't a safe person. Maybe the parent was emotionally manipulative, abusive, dismissive, narcissistic, or just constantly absent when it mattered most. Maybe parent was just a title and not something they lived up to. And yet the child is the one questioned. The child is the one who's guilted, shamed, or gaslit. There's this automatic defense of the parent as if the role of parent comes with some lifetime immunity from accountability. But here's the truth. People don't cut off their parents typically for no reason. It's not impulsive. It's not heartless. It's usually the last result after years of trying, years of hoping things would change, years of therapy, tears, inner conflict. It's often deep, painful act of self-preservation. And yet society keeps asking the wrong question. Instead of why did you walk away, maybe it's time to start asking what happened that made staying impossible.
Man, that last line was serious. What happened that made staying impossible? Ooh, it's a great question, and he's hitting it spot on. You gotta ask more questions before just kind of jumping to the conclusion, especially when you're talking to someone who is sharing that they decided to go no contact. I do think it's wise to, rather than say, oh, don't do that, or man, you only get one set of parents, and I get the heart behind it, but it's best to then ask more questions to try to get an understanding if that's what you really desire to do. And I think it's more, how do I want to say this, considerate of what the person who's sharing has gone through or maybe is going through at the moment. But just let me speak to this trend and conversation that's going on right now of no contact with parents. I just want to be clear. I do believe that there was a cultural understanding that parents could just do things and kids just have to accept it. It was just a way. It was old school. It's an old school thought process, and unfortunately for parents, it's coming back to bite. And I do believe there's some validity to it. And here's why I say that. Because just growing up, I knew that there were certain things like you just could not question your parents about because they were your parents. Now, I personally think there should be space for children to be able to ask questions respectfully, but things were different back then. So now this conversation is being had. But I think it's even more serious than just kids not being able to ask questions. I'm hearing things about traumatic experience of serious abuse, criminal abuse, sexual abuse, things that no child should have to experience. And I think the greater issue of what I'm hearing is that when communication was established to discuss these things, to try to get an understanding, to get justice, to heal, accountability is not being taken on the parental side. And I believe it. I believe it happens. I also believe that when someone, like a child or a young adult, or just an adult period, has been offended, just how offenses work, it's sometimes hard for them to, keep themselves emotionally controlled. And sometimes parents don't do well with that. But I do want to say that I think the greater responsibility is on parents to make sure they do what they can to help their child heal from trauma, to help their child heal from the pain that they feel happened to them. And of course, I'm not saying all parents are wrong, but what I am saying is considering the conversation, accepting the fact that, okay, the child was offended, the child was hurt. I think the first thing that should be done is for a parent to be open to hearing what their child has to say, and because both are human, parents are human, children are human, feelings are involved, right? And that's always going to give different challenges, but I believe conversation, intentional effort to spend time together, even in person, will help with, a child feeling like they got justice, they got an understanding, and even are able to heal. Doesn't mean it wipes away what happened, but it can move the needle forward in a healthy way. So, anything not talked about won't get resolved, right? But the next point, let me say this. Family issues have always been since the beginning of time. Adam and Eve had children. They had 2 sons, the Bible describes it, and one of their sons murdered the other one. So just to make it clear, family issues have been going on since sin, became an issue for humankind, and it will always be. There's nothing new under the sun. So this no contact, this offenses happening is not new. And I personally believe that boundaries are okay. Like, it gets to a point where you do have to establish boundaries, whether it's temporarily you have to establish some boundaries, or just long term into the foreseeable future, or altogether. I think it's okay, because sometimes to be healthy, to be whole, whatever that means for individuals involved, sometimes you have to establish boundaries. And there's nothing wrong with that. But the big question or part of this trend I want to speak to is non-contact with parents biblical? Is it biblical? Is God pleased? When we stand before God, is this something that God will hold, against us in terms of like, hey, you weren't in right standing with me because you went no contact with your parents? And I want to be very, very direct when I say this. Under certain circumstances, going no contact is biblical. It's okay. The Bible even speaks to how sometimes faith, someone following Christ, could become a family issue and divide the family. Like, literally, a family member be completely abandoned and rejected. Now, what is a person? What is that? What is a person to do with that? That is a no contact situation. So under certain circumstances, if someone has had sexual abuse that happened to them and they've forgiven, but this person is yet to apologize and are even and up to that point still wanting or gaslighting or just being derogatory about something like that, God doesn't want children to be experiencing those type of things from their parents. If a parent is on drugs and they're stealing, if a parent is being manipulative in like a sinful and gross way, listen, you're not Jesus. You can't fix anybody's problems on the cross. We're all human. There are times to where behaviors, decisions have such consequences that lead to no contact. And of course, I believe anyone who decides to go cold turkey, no contact with their parents, should definitely be praying about it. They should definitely be praying with, a community of believers, bringing other people in that they trust and can confide in. They should also be doing some sort of practical counseling, whether that's reading, sitting with a therapist. They should be doing other things to make sure they're in the right pocket, make sure they're in the right space to do this and do this with the right heart. But I believe under certain circumstances, God is okay with no contact, because God does not want us just putting ourselves in position to be mistreated to such a degree, to where it's criminal, to where it's sexually abusive and exhaustive, mentally unhealthy, etc., etc. There's so much to be said, but I just encourage anyone who's going on contact, just continue to pray for your parents. And to pray for your heart, to keep the right heart posture, and to and to pray that God will help walk you through all that you're feeling and have experienced, and so on and so on. But that's all I got to say about that. On another note, shameless plug, we got so much There's Hope merch for you. Make sure you tap in. It's There's Hope Brand. You'll see it below. There'sHopeBrand.com on all platforms, on TikTok, on Instagram, on YouTube, and that's our website. So check us out, and until the next video, I'll see you.
Stand on it, be strong.